Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to be going over just the fundamentals of statistics. So it's going to be an overview of kind of what statistics is and a lot of vocabulary that you're going to need going forward. So first off, statistics do play a major role in pretty much everything we do in our daily lives. Just as a kind of a few examples, so statistics does things like determines if a treatment is effective. So whenever they're testing out new treatments for diseases, statistics is what sees, is it actually effective in treating it? How effective is it? Things like that. It also is really good for market research. It's good for interpreting polls or surveys. If anybody has seen the movie Moneyball, you know it's good in sports and so many other places. Right? So, what is statistics? So, statistics is the science of collecting, organizing, and interpreting data. All right? The data that describes or summarizes something. All right? So that's the basic just definition of statistics. All right? So next we're going to look at how statistics work. And we're going to be looking at a specific example. You've probably heard of the Nielsen ratings before. So these are ratings that are used to estimate how many people are watching different shows, specifically in America. And they're based on the data from about 5,000 homes that have these boxes, and these boxes let the statisticians know who is actually watching what, right, and how much of it they're watching. So a few definitions, right? The population in a statistical study is the complete set of people or things being studied. So in our example, that would be all American viewers. Right? Because they're trying to study what America watches, right? All right. Next up, the sample is the subset of the population from which the raw data is actually obtained. So in our example, that would be the 5,000 homes. Right? So the sample is just that little subset of the American people that actually get those boxes that they're actually getting data from, because they're not going to actually get data from every single household in America. That's way too much. So we just use the sample. Next, the population parameters are specific numbers describing the characteristics of the population. All right, so that would be like who watches a specific show. So like over there to the left, it talks about Big Bang Theory. These notes are a little bit older. So in this case, it would be, say, the number of people who watch Big Bang Theory. And lastly, sample statistics are numbers describing the characteristics of the sample found by consolidating or summarizing the raw data collected from the sample. Right? So in our little examples to the left, The Big Bang Theory was last week's most popular show with 22 million viewers. So the sample statistics is the 22 million viewers. It's the conclusion that they draw from it, essentially. All right, so let's look at an example. So describe the population parameters, and sample statistics. The example is a Gallup poll of 1,051 American adults show that 32% of Americans said they have been spending less in recent months and intend to make this their new normal pattern in the years ahead. All right, so let's go through these. First off, the population. So the population is American adults, right? Because that's what we're trying to actually study. The sample is how many did we actually study? So it was the 1,051 American adults. All right, next up, the population parameters. That's what we're actually trying to describe here. So right here, we're trying to say the percentage of Americans that say that they've been spending less. So that would be our population parameters. Percentage of Americans spending less. And lastly, the sample statistics. That's the actual percentage that they got. That's the conclusion that they drew. So in this case, it's the 32% of Americans. All right, so these are just a few things, a few terms that we're going to be working with a lot. So next thing is choosing a sample. So make sure you pay really close attention to this first sentence. Choosing a sample may be the most important step in any statistical study. All right? If the sample fairly represents the population as a whole, then it's reasonable to make inferences from the sample to the population. So essentially, that means if you choose a small sample of people that represent the whole group really well, then whatever you see about that smaller group, you can probably infer that the larger group does the same thing, right? Or at least the same percentages do. So a representative sample is a sample in which the relevant characteristics of the sample members are generally the same as those of the population. So next up, we're going to talk about some common sampling methods. Right? So first up is simple random sampling. Essentially, this just means that random people from the population are selected. In real life, a lot of the time that means computers will just generate random phone numbers, and those random phone numbers are called. There's your sample. Right? Next up would be convenient sampling. That means just use results that are readily available. So if there's already a lot of data on the subject, or if there's some way to just easily get a whole bunch of people to talk about something, a lot of information already on the internet about it. Use stuff that's readily available. All right. Next up would be systematic sampling. So that could, for example, be every third person gets selected, like we see in this example here. First two are skipped, next person's picked. Next two are skipped, next person's picked. Or stratified sampling. So for stratified sampling, just means that you partition the population into at least two strata and then draw a sample from each. So split them up into, say, boys and girls. Right? Now, no matter what sampling method that you choose, there are a couple things to keep in mind. Right? So these are just things to keep in mind. First off, the sample must represent the population. All right. So, for example, if you're wanting to know how many people in the US have cell phones, then random sampling by calling people probably isn't the best idea, because if you're calling them, well, they're probably going to have a cell phone and your study's probably ruined at that point. All right. Next up is the sample size. Sample size is really important, and in general, larger is better. All right, and to see why, just take it to the extreme. So if we wanted to know how many people at San Jac have math as their favorite subject, but we only ask one person, and that one person happens to be me, well then I'm going to say yes, and hey, 100% of people at San Jac have math as their favorite subject. I'm pretty sure those results were skewed a bit, and it's because I was the only one that was asked. So the more people you ask, the better representation you're going to get of the entire population, and the more accurate data you're going to get. And that goes for any of these sampling methods. Any of these sampling methods, in general, the more people you get, the better. So let's look at a couple examples and just say what type of sampling was used in these cases. So first one, you're conducting a survey of students in a dorm. You choose your sample by knocking on the door of every 10th room. All right, so the key here is the every 10th room part. So since you're doing it every 10, this one's going to be systematic sampling. Anytime you're doing it every 10th or every 2nd or every 25th, whatever the case might be, that's systematic. So anytime you see the number with the TH on the top, that's your cue for systematic. Second one, to survey opinions on a possible property tax increase, a research firm randomly draws the addresses of 150 homeowners from a public list of all homeowners. All right, again, this one has a really big keyword for you: randomly. All right, so if it's random, then that's the simple random sampling. All right, and this video is getting a little bit long now, so keep an eye out for part 2. Part 2 will have the rest of these notes, and I will see you in that video.